right, hello everybody. So I'm Jenny Carleo. I'm the County Ag Agent in Cape May. I've been working in cut flower production since about 1997, and we would grow the flowers and sell them at the New York City Green Market at the World Trade Center. So it was a very competitive industry there. And I've been in extension since 2003. So you can ask me your marketing questions. I think retail marketing is probably should be targeted for me. And then we have our farmers, Linda Matoush Rao and her husband Dave Rao. Linda, you saw her on the video, and Dave is her weekend warrior, as he says. So he has a full-time job during the week, and then he helps her. He knows a lot about the equipment and things like that. So we can open up to questions.
Okay. A couple questions about mushroom soil. They want to know, does it affect, and remember, repeat the question for us, does it affect pH? What exactly does it do, and is there an alternative?
Okay.
Make sure you repeat that.
Repeat that.
Okay. The question is about mushroom soil. Does it affect pH, and what does it do, and is there an alternative? Yes, there is an alternative. You could use a different type of manure, whether you use chicken manure, any type of livestock manure you could use. And as far as affecting the pH, I'm not sure that if you used a different manure, how it would affect the pH, but I know with the mushroom soil, our pH pretty much stays the same with it. I haven't done a test on the mushroom soil as compared to what it goes into the flowers, but usually we run a test in the beginning of the year, and it brings the soil to the right pH. So the mushroom soil acts as a organic compost, and once it's put onto, it really doesn't get directly put onto the plant. It gets put around the plant so that it gets absorbed into the soil and gives micro and macronutrients into the soil. And whatever is in this mushroom soil, it's awesome because we've had other people take it for their gardens, and we can use it in our gardens also for vegetable gardens. It just gives such a boost to the plants. So I have been a big advocate of mushroom soil. We purchased our mushroom soil through a company in Pennsylvania called High Tech, and that's where all the big mushroom, Pennsylvania is the mushroom soil capital of the world. So we have it trucked in there, and we get tractor trailer loads of it. And we don't use it every year because financially it's a large financial situation. So we kind of space it out, so depending on what crop we're doing, we want to put it down and give that crop a boost for the season.
Can I add a couple of things?
Sure.
It was recommended to us by other peony growers too, was the primary reason we started using it. But I think it's real important you use what they call new mushroom soil, the same stuff the mushroom growers are buying, because there's also an aftermarket for mushroom soil. Once they've grown their spores, they pull it out and sell that. Stay away from it, because you'll end up with mushrooms all over your property, and you get fungus real fast from it.
That's what they call spent mushroom soil?
I think so, yeah. The high-tech folks will tell you about it. So we get the new, and there's very little difference in the cost. You're really, when you're buying products like that, you're paying for the trucking.
Right.
Okay, and another question that came from the eco-complex is, what is the general range for pH for most flowers?
The question is, what is the general range of pH for most flowers? It's 6.5.
Yours are 4.
But you could do 6, you could do 6.3 up to almost 7.2, would you say? But that's a little bit high.
Seems a little high.
Yeah, I would stay with 6.5 as 6.5 is best. Yeah.
But you forget why we did the peony. One of the reasons we picked peonies was in our SWOT, we realized our soil has 4.5 to 5 on average. And rather than try and raise that pH, we chose the peony because it thrives in acidic soil. Another reason we don't worry too much about the mushrooms soil. We've been told it'll actually lower your pH, but we haven't had that happen yet.
Okay, 2 questions from the other sites about the same thing. What do you use as your solution to keep your flowers in, and can you make your own?
The question is, what can you use as a solution to keep your flowers in, and can you make your own? I imagine you could make your own, but I prefer not to. The companies that sell the solutions, one is Floral Life, one is Crisal, and they've done a lot of research on flowers, and I really think it's best just to purchase the product from the companies. And it's, they're holding solutions. You cut the flower, you get it off the field, and you want to put it in a holding solution because that holding solution is going to help that flower not open up before you get to market. Once you get it into your refrigeration, you don't really want it to open up to full blown to sell it. You want it to be a certain point of opening before you sell your product. If you sell all your flowers full blown, they won't take them all the time. So the solutions are very good to use, and I would highly recommend using whatever is out on the market, whether you use Floral Life or Crisal.
The two companies that she spoke about were Floral Life, Floralife, and Crisal, Chrysal.
Yes.
Okay, we had a question here, and it was the same question at 2 other sites. How do you determine what to direct sow versus plug?
The question is, how do you determine what to sow versus direct plug, or versus a plug? And that's a very good question. Through trial and error sometimes, and it is through trial and error. A lot of times, it depends on what you really want to grow. If you know you're going to grow sunflowers or you're going to grow zinnias, you can direct sow them. But there's some flowers that you just really have to do your research and read up on them and what's going to be a better fit for you. For instance, scabiosa, if you wanted to grow that, you might consider growing it as a plug. And a plug is a small cell that you would receive from another grower, or a greenhouse grower, and you would put that into the soil, directly into the soil. They come in flats, and they come in all different size flats that you could directly. And I try to stay away from a lot of the plugs, so I prefer to direct seed because to me it's a little less expensive.
Some different species don't transplant well. Their roots are very fragile. Then you're going to want to direct seed those so the roots don't get broken up when you transplant them from a cell. Also, the expense, like Linda said, of buying plugs is always going to be more. And if you don't have a greenhouse and you can't grow your own, then you kind of have to. For some of them, certain species take longer to grow than we have in New Jersey, than we have a growing season in New Jersey. So you might want to get them started ahead of time and buy a little bit of time for yourself before you plant them in the field.
From the eco-complex, hydrangeas post-harvest, how do you preserve them?
The question is how to preserve hydrangeas post-harvest. What I do is, and it could be different, other growers might do things differently. I basically cut the hydrangea, strip off all the lower leaves, place it in cool water, and then place it immediately into the refrigeration unit with a Floral Life or a Crisal solution, holding solution. And hydrangeas is amazing. They're just an amazing flower because they will hold up so well in refrigeration. You can leave a hydrangea, believe it or not, a month and a half in refrigeration. And then keep in mind, if you don't sell your hydrangea, you can always turn them upside down and dry them out and use them as a different way.
This might be a good opportunity to talk about the difference in storing them dried versus wet, because that's one of your huge advantages with your hydrangeas.
Right. As a local grower, I prefer to put everything in water. A lot of the cut flower industry in different parts of the country, whether it be Colombia or Europe or whatever, everything is cut and stored into boxes right away. If you decide to do this on a local level, put them in water, because the reason is you get that box from Colombia, the hydration in that flower stem has basically dehydrated. You, on the other hand, if you're the flower farmer, you're taking that cut flower off the field, putting it directly in water, putting it in refrigeration. The hydration or the dehydration of the flower itself is not going to be there as much as something that's in a box that's been shipped to you. And most of the florists that I deal with that is one of their complaints, the dehydration in the flowers. They can't sometimes get certain flowers to come up to speed.
And both sites asked, do you have any experience using organic standards for cut flowers?
No.
Yes, you do. we
We
get that.
have to say the question.
Do you have any experience with organic standards for cut flowers? I have a 30-year history in wheat, alfalfa, and cattle farming, so I'm a big fan of chemicals. Linda is a big fan, as you might have noticed, in pulling weeds by hand, which is an organic standard.
Yeah.
That sprayer was one of the battles that we had because I felt like walking around with a backpack spraying baking soda to kill fungus wasn't cutting it on the peonies. So we use a product called Cease, which is an organic fungicide, and it's done a wonderful job. And we've only used it this last season of just absolutely eliminating the problems we were having with powdery mildew. And it doesn't matter what you grow in the Northeast, you're going to have powdery mildew eventually. So it's just done a great job. But the mushroom soil is an organic practice. All this hand weeding is organic. About the only chemical we actually use is to kill weeds around the perimeter. The fence itself, we spray Roundup.
Right.
Where else do we use anything that's considered EPA regulated? We both have the chemical license, and we're wondering why, because we don't really use it.
I will always, I guess I always research with a company called BioWorks, and they're an organic company that sells all types of organic pesticides, fungicides, you name it. And I'll research them first, call them up, scope out all the information I can from them, and then if all else fails, I'll try it. And if it fails, then I'll try a different product that would be registered.
In terms of organic standards, I don't think it would be too much different to grow organically than to grow conventionally in New Jersey, because we just don't have that many chemical control options for a lot of the diseases or the pests. And that's because the chemical companies can't really afford to pay for the registration process through the government, because they're not going to make a lot of money off of it, because there's not too many flowers grown, so there's not too many people buying the product for them to make it worth it to put it on the market or label it on the market. So I don't think that there's a problem growing organic flowers in our area. You're going to have more disease problems, no doubt, and more weed problems, but it's not that you can't do it.
And I think we learned quickly from many of you probably and others that we've met that it's just, that's the way to go. Pull your weeds by hand.
Right.
You spend the money on the labor or do it yourself, because you can't afford to spray flowers. You just can't afford to do it. You're going to damage the product itself faster than you're going to kill the weeds.
Right.
Okay, a question we have from here. It's kind of a two-part. What are the best flowers to grow that are adaptable to New Jersey's hot and humid summers, and are there any that are just don't even bother trying?
The question was, what are the best flowers to grow in New Jersey with the hot and humid summers? Well, I'm a true believer that sunflowers are just a fantastic crop to grow, and research the variety you want to grow.
Say Vincent.
No, won't tell them. I've done Sunbright Supreme is one variety. There's many varieties in the catalogs, but when you grow a sunflower, make sure you grow a pollenless sunflower, because that is the sunflower that you'll be able to sell to the florist or to the wholesalers or to the public if you're doing markets. If you do a black oil sunflower, which is what you feed your birds with, you're going to have pollen all over the table, and then there goes your reputation. So sunflowers are a wonderful crop to grow. Zinnias are an awesome crop to grow, easy to grow. Marigolds, believe it or not, everybody thinks, oh, marigolds, no. Marigolds are a beautiful crop because, one, they're hardy. There's tall marigolds. I grow marigolds taller than me. There's a tall variety, it's in the seed catalogs, and people want them because a lot of different ethnic groups use marigolds in ceremonies for weddings. In fact, All Souls' Day is a huge marigold day. That's a big, if you can get a marigold for the day after Halloween, then you're good to go. You can get it sold. I mean, if you can keep it if you have a greenhouse. But marigolds, zinnias, sunflowers. I'm trying to think what else do we grow. Look at my book.
It's not just what we grow.
Hydrangeas. Hydrangeas are wonderful. You can definitely get a nice hydrangea crop going, and the beauty about hydrangeas is they're a perennial. They're going to come up for you. It's a shrub. It's going to come up every year for you. Sedum. Oh, sedum. Sedum grows like crazy. It's a perennial. It's sturdy. You can knock it down and it'll come back for you. It's great. I don't know if you're familiar with all these varieties, but trying to think what else.
Yeah, the second part of the question was what not to grow. We've done some things we wouldn't do again.
I think cosmos is probably one crop which I actually love because it's so pretty and so wispy. It just doesn't seem to, the florists don't seem to pick it up a lot. If you're doing a farm market, you can definitely put it into your bunches. But as far as if your market is for florists or for the wholesalers, you're not going to get that crop sold to them. Trying to think what else.
We traveled the country a little bit looking at different products, and went through the Skagit Valley and saw the tulip industry and realized that's not for us. It's just mass production, and you've got to have a ton of equipment. And Linda wanted to do dahlias, and we met some folks and looked at the operations in Illinois for dahlia. We didn't want any part of something that we had to dig up and store the root all winter to keep it from freezing and then go replant it. But there's a lot of growers that we've met locally that do well with them. So there's products that you may or may not want to deal with for the labor aspect that could still be nice. And it's all about money, isn't it? Ching-ching.
Yeah, but
Dahlias bring a lot of money.
You have to know that what is that stem value worth when you go to sell that flower, and do you want to plant that flower because of the value of the stem? I mean, what do you get for a hydrangea compared to a zinnia? Zinnia might be 35 cents, but I can sell a hydrangea for $1.50. So, you know, you have to do a lot of research and read, and actually sometimes just going to the flower shops and talking to them and asking them, what would you like, if I was a farmer, flower farmer, what would you like me to grow for you? And you'd be surprised what they're starting to change over and want out of for their crops to design with.
If you're selling to florists, definitely stay away from things that are really competitive on the international market, like roses and carnations. We cannot grow those in America for the price that they can sell them to our florists for. So try not to compete on price with some of those kind of flowers. It's not a climate issue, it's really a market issue. You won't make your money back. Unless you grow a rose like that, it's like a totally different rose and you're going for direct retail. But for a florist will want that tight bud that really kind of doesn't change the whole time, like the Ecuadorian roses or something like that.
Okay, all right, one more question, and then we're going to come back to the panel. But we did get this from all the sites. What's the ideal temperature for cut flower storage? Can you keep vegetables in the same cooler? And how long do they last without refrigeration?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so you have this fact sheet that we gave to you. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't repeat that question. That was a very long question. But post-harvest handling first, right?
Perfect temperature.
Perfect temperature.
You put vegetables and flowers
Look
in the
through
same
this
box.
because all the different varieties and species are in here for common cut flowers, and we gave this to you. Everyone in the class should have this in your packet. And it has a list of all of the different species and the temperatures that they're best stored at. What was the other part of the question?
Can you keep vegetables in the same cooler?
Can you keep vegetables in the same cooler? Do not keep fruits and vegetables in the same cooler as your cut flowers. Vegetables, as they're sort of like decomposing, as they're holding there, especially potatoes and apples, they exude this ethylene gas, and that will actually cause the petals to drop off your flowers. Also, don't store your bulbs in there if you are storing any kind of bulb to plant in the future. It will cause that bulb not to flower. Oh, and Linda wants to add to that question.
I just wanted to say that you have to know your customer too, because some of your customers might be a produce stand that is a produce market, I should say, and you're selling to them, and they're going to take that whole box of sunflowers and throw them in the refrigeration, and you're like, no, don't put that in there. So you have to educate your customer too to make sure that they're not going to make the same mistake and put both all their produce in with your flowers.
That's a great question. I mean, and I've ruined some of Linda's flowers in the flower shop storing watermelons and leftover stuff.
It's good for beer, but anything else, forget
And
it.
then quickly, how long do they last without refrigeration?
Not long.
It depends on the crop that it is. Sunflowers, if
How long do they last?
how long do flowers last without refrigeration was the question, and I feel that one, it depends on your crop, but they're not going to last as long as you would like it to, because depending on the heat of the day, if it's a summer day and it's 91 degrees out and you've just cut them and you've got them sitting there, they're only going to last maybe 4 or 5 days for you, if that. If it's a sunflower, if it's a zinnia, a couple days. If it's a marigold, they're going to last a couple days for you. But what happens after you've gotten that 4 or 5 days and then you've sold it to the customer? They want to see that flower last at least 4 to 5 to 6 days. And in the cut flower industry, especially if you're selling to florists, they expect those flowers to last a certain period of time when you sell that to them. You don't want to sell a flower that's been cut for 5 days and sitting, and then you decide to sell it to your florist, because then they have to, that sits in their refrigeration unit and they might not use it for 3 or 4 days after that, and then it goes to the customer, and now you've got a flower that's maybe 8 days old, and the lifespan of a flower, there's not too many flowers that are going to last 2 weeks.
But all that said, I'd like to comment about the peony itself. One of the things that really, there's several things that attracted me to the peony when we were trying to figure out, first we wanted to have a flower farm, and then what the heck do you grow, right? But the thing about the peony that's really cool is it's a perennial, meaning you plant it once and it just keeps coming back, and it grows. The crown grows every year, so as it grows and grows, so does your income. And it gets to the point where you can literally make $35 a year off of a $4 investment. And you can't get that to market right away. But the cool thing about storing it at 38 degrees, is that what it stores at? Is you can store them, they told us, for 6 to 8 weeks, several people have. And our experience over the last couple of years has been about 4. So it gives you opportunity to collect a whole bunch of them in your refrigeration, load a truck, and drive them to New York or drive them to Philadelphia to the market.
So here's a question for the panel. How much did you charge for the bouquet in the video? And how do you figure out how much to charge? And are there any pricing guides you can recommend?
The question is, how much did I charge?
She's mic'd, so they heard it already.
Oh, all right.
We changed it.
All right, how much did I charge for the bouquet in the video? That bouquet runs anywhere from $8 to $10 to a wholesale level. Basically meaning that whoever I'm selling it to, whether it be a florist, I'm going to sell it $8 to $10. What I did in the wintertime to figure that out, I did my homework. This is my book. I have a price list of how much everything costs per stem, and how I find that out is one, I belong to Pennox, and I belong to Delaware Valley, and I look up their price list and I see how much they're charging for things. But there is also on the USDA website, there is a price list of all different flowers in the United States that are grown, and you can look up that particular flower. Not all the flowers are on there. Also, if you become a member of the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers, they also, this year, they have come out with a price list on the flowers, on how much each flower per stem is. So, for instance, if a sunflower I'll sell a sunflower for approximately 85 cents wholesale, because that florist is going to sell it for $2.50 or $1.99, depending on the location of the florist. So you have to know where to find those prices, and you're not just making them up and pulling them out of air. There are guidelines for that. The Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers is a wonderful association to get into. The dues are once a year, and there's a forum, and there's all kinds of information. There's plenty of growers that write into this company or into the association, and they ask every question under the sun, and we have learned so much from this association also. What was the other part of the question?
Price of the bouquet, how much do you know? What was the other part of the question?
How much was the bouquet, and how do you know how much to charge?
how do I know much?
She adds up the stems and
Add up the stems, and then add your labor in there too. Don't forget your labor. So if I said, okay, I've got 3 sunflowers, 85 cents a piece. My zinnias could be 45 cents a piece or 35, depending on what you're charging. You add all them up, and then you also put a labor charge in there. And then, of course, you don't forget your wrap, your paper wrap, and your rubber band. And that's how I figure on the price. But you have to kind of stay in market, because if you overprice yourself, now you're sitting on a bunch of flowers. So you've got to feel it out and figure out what's the right price to charge.
it's funny that product was in the video, because it's something that Linda originally created for a bunch of farmers markets that were just selling the sunflowers, the stem, and she was dropping them off up and down Route 9. And then they started asking for bouquets, and Linda's experience led to doing that and things like this product sitting on the table. But I think you have a huge advantage, and I recommend, and I haven't been to one because I have a wife that taught me everything, but you can go take flower design class too as a grower and learn how to put this stuff together. Don't just assume you're grabbing a bunch of flowers, cutting them off and rubber banding them, because it'll look like crap. And there's a trick. She showed it to you real quick, but I can tell you, been with Linda for 20 years, I'm still not very good at it.
I highly recommend doing a design class. It'll give you the confidence you need to build a bouquet if you're going to sell to any type of market. And you want to feel confident because you have to sell that product to them. And you definitely want to look like you know what you're doing, look like you know what you're talking about. So it would be a great thing to do for yourself.
Yeah. And Somerset County Park Commission, they actually are offering a Thanksgiving floral arrangement design class.
There you go.
So Nick will have that information in Somerset, and I can send it to Meredith and Mercer if you want me to. But for pricing, on the low side, you have to cover your costs. So know what it costs to grow, at least in general, that crop. And then on the high side, definitely don't price yourself out, because like Linda said, when she prices what her bouquet is, she knows how much that cost her. The florists are always doing that. Every single time they pick out a stem, they're counting in their head how much they're going to price that bouquet for, just like Linda said.
We have a couple questions about what form of trellising works best for flowers, and do you use any netting?
I don't have to answer. I don't use netting, and trellising, the only thing I ever had to trellis was sweet peas when I did them, and I probably won't do them again. They're a beautiful crop, but I just found that it wasn't working for me. I don't do any trellising.
Okay. What size farm did you start with? Was it by yourself, and would you do it different?
What size would you say we started with?
That's the toughest thing to answer. It's hard to be fair to you guys. We weren't trying to start a flower business. We kind of backed into it because we had a sheep farm across the street using our property as a pasture, and that business was declining. And if you own land in New Jersey, it's not big. We have 17 acres. We bought it to live there and retire, and we intended to look at the sheep the rest of our lives. But then we realized to keep our farm assessment, which I didn't know anything about in New Jersey, you really need to have something that produces money. So we got involved with the beach plum folks, and we put up 400 beach plum trees, and thinking that, well, that'll make a couple $1,000s a year. You can report it as income, you're done, good to go. Mow around them, you're done. Didn't work out very well. And Linda said, why am I sitting here looking at all this grass? I want to grow some flowers. She was trying to retire from the floral industry, but she said, I want to grow flowers and see what it's like. And we did about a year of research, and the flowers itself, literally, and the video's got a tiny typo in it. It says we bought 300 variety of flowers and tested them in a bed. We bought 300 roots of 27 different variety of peony, because it was her favorite flower, being a wedding floral designer for so many years. And as you start to go to these meetings and you read and you research peonies, you find out it's a very lucrative business for a lot of people, and has been. And 50 years ago, roughly 60 or 70 years ago, some of you might remember or know people, it was huge to New Jersey.
Right.
And then it kind of died off, and Robin was sharing with me earlier that it had started dying off in around the 70s. And I thought NAFTA was what destroyed it, but she said no, it was pretty much the foreign markets. But we heard from local florists that they wanted a fresh peony, and they're hard to get. And the people that were growing peonies locally had, they're small. There's not very many of them. So it was entertaining and we really didn't do exactly the steps you guys just went through with SWAT, but we did a business plan. Linda.
Yes, I did go and do a business
Jenny's
plan.
project, or Annie's project with Jenny. I think
Jenny knew we were new in the area, so she came to our house and she said, would you go to Annie's project? And I put together a business plan, and that was really a very good key factor to help us get started on what we wanted to do. And
it's right on plan, and we're getting rich. So we went from about 1/4 of an acre, literally, of peonies. You plant them in a spacing that was asked earlier of 3 by 5. So figure 15 square feet. There's 45,000 square feet in an acre. You can get whatever that number is, 15,000 plants in an acre. So we started out with a small footprint and literally saw that about 10 variety did very well. Some of them didn't do so well. And these peonies have been propagated all over the planet. They're literally grown from Morocco to Alaska now. So you really want to find one that works well in the type of soil you have. That's really important. So we picked the varieties that Linda liked for the color. And as she mentioned, we didn't want to harvest 7,000 or 8,000 peonies at once. So she also noticed the day they came in, the day they bloomed, the day you had to cut them. And we tried to spread our crop out so we're harvesting for a full 6 weeks. And then we made the deeper investment, and we bought 2,000 to 1,500 of each of the ones we liked. And now we have 3 acres, roughly 2.75, I think, of peony. And honestly, it's more than we can handle.
in addition, I planted 300 hydrangeas,
Lots
and
of
then
other
I did a
things.
lot of annuals. I did all the sunflowers, the cosmos, and the marigolds, and all this other stuff. So
Retirement turned into a business.
with all this in mind, because the peonies take so many years, it's, the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, the third year they leap. It's 3 years of waiting. Well, I can't wait that long, so I planted sunflowers, and I wanted to get some money back. So I started to hustle myself down and up Route 9 and down on all the coastal areas, and I sold sunflowers, and then I started to sell bunches. So I still have that business, but in reality, now that I look at it, it's like, what do I really want to do? But when we did our farm and we put it into rows, I said to Dave, I said, when we do the peonies, I don't want rows, I want curves. And he's like, what do you mean you want curves? So in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to do agritourism too, because I thought if all else fails, we're right in Cape May County, agritourism's like, there's too many people that go to the shore. So that was my fallback plan, and I think I'm going to do more of a crossover and a cutover and do less of the annuals and more of the peonies. I'm not sure yet. I just have to really look at my books, and not only did I make a business plan, but this is what my Bible is for the season, and this is what I go by, and it's got every schedule in there, and every spray list, and every contact and price list, and this is what I do in the wintertime, and it makes me crazy. So, but I try to stay really organized, because I think in this industry you have to, and it can get away from you so fast because it's so much fun. I mean, you see a flower, I think the biggest thing for me was to plant a flower, to watch it grow, and to take those flowers and design with it. Because crossover, all these years I've been a designer, I'm actually now designing with all the flowers I have in my field. And what a great feeling that is for a florist, because you're like, wow, that's cool. You don't have to buy them from some overseas company.
Don't mean to interrupt, but
That's
she
okay.
mentioned in the video that one of the reasons we went all in with 7,000 plants. What that meant was we learned from lots of other growers. This gentleman named Bernie was wonderful. We spent a day with him, and he's in North Carolina, and married a lady who was a florist, and her daddy had some peonies growing, and they took 30 plants in this sleep bloom, whatever. What Linda meant was it takes 3 years before you actually cut for production. You want to plant your root and let it grow, let it grow, let it grow. And in the fourth year, you can take about a third of your plant, and then 2/3 every year after that. And the crown of this thing just keeps propagating. So you get to the point where 1 or 2 stems turn into 30, 40, and then you're selling them for $1 a piece. So Bernie took 30 plants And now he's in his 70s, and he's got 165 acres of peonies as he propagated every root. And his whole family's involved in the business. So he went from being a truck driver to a peony farmer in about 40 years. Huge peony farmer.
Okay. Kind of a two-part question. Part of it's for Linda, and the other part will probably be for Jenny. Linda, what do you have planted now that you're able to harvest, and is there potential for off-season crops, maybe in a high tunnel or a greenhouse for cut flowers?
I don't have anything planted right now.
But you harvested that.
But I harvested this today. So this is basically dried, a few roses left over, but
Planted blue chlorum last week.
right, I did plant blue chlorum, but that doesn't come up till the spring. But if you do have high tunnels, or if you have a greenhouse, there's a lot of options you can do. I mean, you can plant lisianthus. You can plant a lot of different crops. You can plant the lilies for the Christmas season. There's a whole selection of flowers you can get into, because in this industry everything goes by the holidays. You know, Christmas is coming up. What do you need for there? What different type of plant you can plant in a greenhouse would be suitable for the holiday, and that's where you want to sell those plants.
Do you want to talk about the Cool Flower book?
Yes, these books are incredible. This is called the Cool Flower book. It's by Lisa Mason Ziegler, and she's part of the Cut Flower Growers, Specialty Cut Flower Growers Association. This book basically will tell you all the different crops you can grow in a cool season, meaning that this September or by October, you need to get these seeds in the ground, or you need to get the plugs in the ground if you have a greenhouse. And what'll happen is these plants get established into the soil, they get a nice hard root system, so by spring they come up early, they come up fast, they like the cooler weather to get started in, and you're first to market with that particular crop. So this is a great book to start with if you wanted to read something like this. It's really easy reading, and it tells you everything you need to know about it. If I can go on, I just wanted to mention this Flower Farmer book. This is by Lynn Bazesqui. I think I have messed her name up. This is a wonderful book. It's the first book I bought, and it has everything you want to talk about, all the different flowers that you can grow by field, by greenhouse, and this is a good book to get. Read it and do your research with this. So I would highly recommend this book. This book was pretty cool too. It's called The 50-Mile Bouquet. It's about a person who went to all these different farms and talked to all the different growers that were at each farm, and asked them questions and asked them all about, you know, their farming techniques. So this is a pretty neat book, and very seasonal book. And Deborah Princing puts that together. She's also part of the Association of Cut Flowers. As far as greenhouse plants, Mary Ellen, you probably could tell me more than that.
They can't hear her. It's a different world. We're field.
Lynn Bazicki also wrote a book about, I think it's called the Hoop House Handbook, something like that, and she goes into detail about crops you can grow in the hoop house during the off season. Because basically the hoop house will give you 6 weeks on either end of like right now, where we just got a frost, so whatever I have growing in my hoop house is good for probably about another month. And then it will give you another 6 weeks in the early spring, so it gives you a head start. That's for an unheated hoop house.
Okay, so the comment, for those of you who can't hear the audience in the other sites, Lynn Bazinski, who wrote The Flower Farmer, also wrote another book on hoop houses.
And the one thing I didn't mention that is a huge crop is curly willow. Curly willow gets harvested, and that is an outdoor field-grown shrub. Or I guess
They call them woodies.
Woodies,
People
right.
refer to all these sticks as woodies.
And then you have your berries. The
That didn't sound right.
Not Hyperican berry, the red berry.
Winterberry? Winterberry holly?
Winterberry. Winterberry is a huge crop in our industry. There is a farmer that...
Red twig dogwoods.
Yeah, you also have bittersweet. Could be grown in the fall. It's a vine. You grow all that. You take it all, cut it all, and before it's ready to bloom out, go to any florist will take it. Well, these basically got frozen.
Oh.
But your willows are a great crop to grow in the wintertime, and that you can just take a field, plant your willows. You've got curly willow, you've got fantail willows. Willows are awesome, and the floral industry uses them all the time.
And if you're serious about doing this, there's a gentleman in, where's Rick Uva live? Seabury?
Fredericksburg, Maryland, yeah, Seabury
Fredericksburg,
Farm.
Maryland. He's got all the wood products and flowers, and they've just gone wild with it as a small flower farm.
You have another question?
I have a couple production questions. What is the range of dates for peony production in New Jersey? And do you do any pinching to encourage branching? Uh-oh.
Oh, wow.
It's backbreaking work, the pinching.
Yes, peonies, well, as far as their bloom time, their production rate is, our peonies in New Jersey, this year they were a little on the late side. Usually they start around May 16th and go out to the middle of June maybe. That's pushing it, probably the first or second week in June. And then as far as when the peonies come up, peonies have one main bloom, and then they come up with a lot of little lateral blooms. So you have to go around to each peony stem, and if your plant has 24 blooms on it, you have to pinch off all those other lateral blooms off that peony to get one commercial peony. And when I say one commercial peony, you want that bloom to have a large head on it, and you want the length of the stem to be almost the length of your arm, because the length is what sells in the flower industry. It's really important to know how you package your crops up and how long you have to cut stems, because for whatever reason we all cut our flowers down, but we have to sell our flowers long. I don't think they crossed over yet. So length is important and pinching is important, and it took us weeks to pinch all those peonies because every plant had at least anywhere from 6 to 10 blooms on them, and our test bed had 18 blooms on them, so you had to bend over and pinch them all. So you need some kids to do that one.
And just a note on that with the stem length, when you're purchasing varieties from a catalog, make sure you're purchasing varieties that are for cut flower production. Don't purchase the garden style, because those are usually grown for being known for being compact, and that's the opposite of the long stem, but the florists want the longer stem the better.
And there's 1,000 varieties of peonies.
It's tricky. I think we looked at over 1,800 and narrowed it down to 30, and then narrowed that down to about 15 that we work with.
Mm-hmm. So with all that in mind, and it's not even necessarily peonies as far as the stem length. That goes for all the flowers, whether it be sunflower, whether it be ageratum, dahlias. They don't want these little stalks this big if you're selling them to a wholesaler. They want the length at least 18 to 24 inches long on most of your crops. And if you wanted to store, if you're going to do this, you need buckets. You need to buy some buckets, or you need to gather buckets, go to the supermarket, get pickle buckets, I don't know, whatever. But I purchase perconas, and I also have round utility buckets, and you need to keep your buckets clean. It's very important in our industry to keep all your buckets clean, all your tools clean, because bacteria builds up in all your buckets, and we wash our buckets with bleach and water all the time. Once a week, I have a stack of buckets. I go through and wash them all, let them dry. Don't put them away wet. You'll never get them apart. And so just keep it up. Know that you're not going to take that dirty bucket and use it with fresh flowers, because that bacteria is still in there and hasn't been cleaned yet.
And it looks like we probably have time for one more question. Can dried flowers be incorporated into a cut flower operation? Would you recommend it? And does it increase the marketability of your flowers?
Good question. I actually had that happen to me this year. There is a person that's looking for dried flowers in this area, and she's from Pennsylvania, and she's tired of paying the shipping costs from all the way across the country.
She's a wholesaler.
She is a wholesaler, and I said, okay, I'll do it. So we did it with some peonies, we did it with some sunflowers, and the time it took to wrap them, dry them, and I wasn't even doing it right, you could say. You really need a professional drying room, you need the right equipment, you need the time. And to do both, it's very task oriented. You have to cut them and dry them. You might as well sell them if you're going to cut them and rubber band them and then hang them, and then you have to wait till they hang, and then you have to box them up again. I think it's kind of a hard crossover. I think if you're going to do dried flowers, do dried flowers. If you're going to do cut flowers, do cut flowers.
It is a great question, and I looked into it because I thought, what a great aftermarket, right? Take the rest of the peonies that didn't sell. The dehydration equipment alone can be several $100,000, and your utilities against that are outrageous. And you know, it's a different world. I walked away. There's no way.
And in New Jersey, the moisture is,
The
there's just
mold
too much
problem and the
moisture
humidity
here.
level, it's tough around.
I would not recommend the dried flower business because you'll not be able to compete with like China, or even I heard today Arizona has a big dried flower industry there because of the humidity, because of our land costs, and also because of the shrinkage. Have you ever tried to handle a dried flower? They break.
Oh, yeah.
So you're not going to be able to sell as many as you grow because there's going to be a major inventory loss just from every time you handle it. You'll lose product.
Sorry, that was a very long no.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
We have to move on, right?
Dan's gonna,
Okay. Okay, so can you do it because you're mic'd now?
I'm no longer Mike.
Oh, you're no longer mic'd. Okay. So Dan Kluczynski's coming up, and he's going to do our evaluations for the class. He's the department chair for agricultural and resource management agents at Rutgers, and we would really appreciate your feedback on the class today and on how you're going to use the information. So Dan, I'm going to let you sit here. Okay.
Great, thanks. Well, first, I want to say thank you to our guests, panelists. They've been really great, haven't they? And as Jenny mentioned, part of our grant and the program that we're running over the series requires us to do some evaluation. We need to report back to the granting agency, but we also would like to collect information from all of you who've attended the sessions about what you've learned, what you intend to use from the sessions you've attended, and for us to be able to do some follow-up evaluation as well to make sure that we can check back to see what came out of your educational experience. So what you should have in front of you, it's being distributed each site, is a survey. And there's two sheets. The first sheet is what's called an Assent Form. We need to follow federal guidelines since we're asking you to be involved with what we call research and making sure that you're aware of what we're asking you to do. And basically we're asking you to complete this 6-question survey, which is the second page. If you're willing to do so, your comments, the information you provide will remain confidential. That means that I will be the only person who has access to the information. We will compile the information for this session on all 3 sites. And if we ever use the information for, let's say, a report or a presentation or a journal article, the data will be presented in composite form. So your specific personal answers will never be revealed to anyone other than me who's handling the data. The study, as you can read on the Assent Form, is voluntary, so you do not have to take part in the survey if you do not wish to. If you don't, you can just leave the survey blank. You also could stop answering the questions at any time if you do not feel like you wish to answer all the questions. But as you can see from the questions, we're asking you what you thought of the sessions, what you've learned, and what you intend to do with the information presented, as well as the resources that are available to you from this project. I would ask you to make sure that you please put your last and first name at the very top of that survey. That will allow us to double check between who's been registered for the program and who answered the survey. Again, that data, once we enter it in our spreadsheet, will no longer be linked. Your responses will never be linked with your name. Okay? So if there's any questions at all about the survey, I'm happy to take them. Again, it's 2 pages if you could make sure that you do both sides of it, and then just return them to the proctor or someone there at your site who will handle them for you.
And you're going to be the one collecting them here.
And I will collect them here at Rarick at Bridgeton. Okay?
We just
One more
wanted
thing.
to let you folks know, it took us years to get here, right? And we intend to do this for at least a couple more decades if we live long enough, God willing. It is a nice workout, keeps you a little bit healthy, grow muscles, things like that. But We'd like to invite you to the farm. We have public events a couple times a year. There's one every weekend after Thanksgiving. Linda does things with dried flowers, of all things. And she makes holiday wreaths for people. And it's tied to an event across the street with the sheep farm. So we have a local artisan doing pottery. We have people knitting things. It's a really wonderful time. And it's that weekend after Thanksgiving, first weekend in December. And then in May, last year we had our first agritourism event. 500 people signed up. Some of you attended. 250 people came, and it was pouring rain the whole
It was great.
And we have live music and food. We intend to repeat that. It'll probably be a different band. It might be a different restaurant. Who knows? But I see that growing. And we set the farm up so people could walk around, learn about cut flower farming, learn about peonies, and enjoy themselves. And you're welcome to come to that as well. And then our website is sunsetflowerfarm.com. We keep the Facebook account a little bit more active, and if you sign up on our email list there, we'll keep you posted on events as they happen in the area. I think agritourism is something that you really ought to think about, because there's literally groups of people planning to come on buses from as far away as New York and Pennsylvania, mid-Pennsylvania. She's contacted garden clubs. What do they call master gardeners? There's a few of you here tonight. And their clubs have come, and it's just an opportunity for you to learn and an opportunity for us to meet you and share our experience.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for sharing everything with us tonight.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.